All right, welcome everyone at the next multi-networking community sync. Today is October 30th. Today we want to continue the discussion on our integration with the DRA. This probably is going to be taking the whole meeting. Any other smaller topics you want to touch on before we kick this one on? All right, if not, just I think next week, is it next week KubeCon or 2 weeks in? I think in 2 weeks, right?
In 2 weeks, yes.
So yeah, next week we still can meet, I assume. I think that's so. So yeah. All right. So to give some recap on what we discussed last week, I think we were looking at what can be with the array, what can be the reference for the network that we want to reference in a pod and or the other objects. And the conclusion from last week is to create a CRD. I think this is what we concluded on, is to the proposal would be now to create a CRDs, just exactly what pod network was when we have it in our cap from last year, and then create a controller that would create all the DRA stuff that we need to. So basically with that, we can completely hide away all the kind of DRA aspects of configuration. I think that's, I was thinking about this, and I think that's, by the way, I think the go-to solution that we should have from the very beginning. I think we come with that conclusion because we realized, and Lionel mentioned that all the resource DRA objects are namespaced, which doesn't really work for us when a network, for a network to be a namespace object. This kind of gives this weird of configuration. Maybe this is something that, like, I know what app network attachment does this, but it's all namespace then, and it's kind of doesn't work for me, at least from view of namespace being network being the whole infrastructure level object like Node is. Um, I assume this has good capabilities for RBAC cases, and that's a good case, and we can still even leverage with that controller and with that level of applicability similar features, because what we can then in the future do is we can control where a specific DRA components be created, right? Since the objects are namespace, the controller will have to grab the pod network, which is cluster scoped, and then replicate the same object into all the namespaces. And then with that, we can then limit, okay, don't do it on that namespace or this namespace, right? So it can be fully automated. I think with, and Doug, tell me if I'm or anyone else using NDA Multus. I know today you just have to replicate everything in the namespaces, right? Uh, I'm not sure whether that's a good or bad, or maybe Doug, do you have maybe, or anyone else has some background on the namespacing? Was that just because, no, yeah, why it was that? Or because, to be honest with you, pod network being non-namespaced, scope-based, cluster scope-based, I'm pushing towards that, but I don't have really, except for that, like sounds right, like a node, but I'm not really having any other arguments for it. So, and maybe we should be namespaced. Doug,
I
yeah.
mean, maybe I should refer to the spec and see what we recorded in there. But at least from my standpoint, it did give an opportunity to whatever, have some kind of structure for how you wanted to have uh whatever namespace admins to use this. So at least, so something that Multis wound up implementing was, and it's not directly part of the spec, but essentially the gist is allow pods to only refer to network attachment definitions in their own namespace.
Right.
So like pod and namespace foo, net attached def and namespace foo. Now you can't cross-reference other namespaces. Now, there's inherent limitations of that, right? So that means now if you're trying to manage this stuff across a bunch of namespace, you got to kind of copy those to the same namespace. So what we did
Right.
wind up doing was giving Multis an option to say, these are the global namespaces that you can refer to from any pod. So like whatever you say default is a global namespace, and then that way you don't have this like duplication problem. I mean, I see, and this way it's like if you've created some type of a like more special class of network attachments that could be security sensitive and they're in one namespace, you don't want somebody to be able to attach to those networks in some namespace that does less privileged things, I guess you could say. I see some advantages in that. I see what you're driving at here, like having to go and copy this stuff to every namespace seems potentially dirty and potentially scale problem, right? So if you have tons of namespaces and tons of these type of objects, then you got to dupe them across all of them. Yeah, I'm sort
I'm
of
not.
talking like,
I'm not,
yeah.
Doug. I'm not concerned about scale here. Keep in mind how many networks you would really have. What is the biggest that you saw in cluster or anyone else saw? Have you seen a cluster with 1,000 network attachments?
I
I don't.
can't
I'm
say that
asking
I've
because
certainly
from
seen that number, but yeah,
because
yeah,
and by the way, 1,000 isn't big number for a controller to handle.
right.
I think the problem starts at 100K or something like that. When we have like 100K objects that you would have to manage, right? That's why I'm less concerned about like duplicating the things across all namespaces, right? If we were to say, yeah, they will be watched, and keep in mind, our controller will be the only one that would watch them. That's one aspect. The other aspect is it's centralized, so it's not like the events has to go to every node. That's another thing. So those are aspects that makes me think like if it's just 1K, it's not a big deal. If we're talking 100K or a million, maybe yes, then I would be concerned. And even then, it's not so much. Keep in mind, this is not an object that's gonna be very active when you once set it up. You set it up, you set everything is ready, and that's it. There is no more. It's not that what I'm getting at. Pod is the worst case scenario, right? If we go because pod comes up, come down, they change states, and they have to be spread across. This is the worst part, right? If it's a project, if it's a object that keeps it lives a lot, right? Where it's constantly changing, there is a condition happening back and forth or something, right? Here you said it once, like Node, right? No, Node maybe not a good example because Nodes we populate Node with bunch of stuff, right? But here you set it up once. At least that's my opinion on it, and I'm less concerned about scale. What do you think?
I mean, that's fair enough argument. I tend to agree.
But then on the name spacing, maybe that should be because basically the CRT. I think namespace was the first reason for us to kind of go towards that, but I really do like that idea of let's just create a CRD as we had it, and let's just have a controller that will configure the DRA however it has to be configured. Why I'm saying this is because then user doesn't have to know DRA. We just expose our CRD, and we whatever the array is, we don't have to have any webhooks, any validation behind it to kind of, oh, now you have to create this complicated object, and you don't have to, and you have to know what to put and where in the DRA spec to get it functional, right? So this is, we hide that behind just our simple CRD that has just a few things. Yes, Lam.
I think the issue or the complex part with this idea is the scheduling, because when you do a request in the resource claim, you specify some parameters which the scheduler will use to find the right nodes where this resource is available.
Right.
And I don't see how our controller for this pod network will manage to do that, considering that this resource slice will be created by each and every driver, so networking driver.
Mm-hmm.
So each resource slice which contains their own parameters.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really see
that's fair. Are you saying we need to have, then the installers would have to have some integration into the DRA aspect? Is that what you're calling out? Each driver would have to have some input into this. Isn't that independent, like the number of and how resourcing is done?
What do you mean? Like for example, you have a resource, a device class, I don't know, VLAN, and this device class indicates where has a resource slice
Right.
linked to it,
Yeah,
and it indicates on which node it can be allocated. So
right.
you will have like VLAN ID should be provided between 0
right.
and 4000 something. But if you have another device class that is, I don't know, another type of interfaces, you will have different properties and parameters.
Lionel, how is it done with DRA? So I know, like, for example, I give you an example why I'm saying that. Today, the same thing, for example, SRLV is done through device plugin. And you have individual device plugins on each of the nodes that report specific value of that. What is the equivalent for this in DRA?
It's the part that I'm not so aware, but
okay,
to me is about selector and set expression.
Right. So yeah, we need to dig into that, because what I'm thinking and what I'm hoping here is the claim is just a reference to a resource name, right? We can control what is the resource name, how the resource name, the device name will be configured in such a way that or it can even be a parameter inside this guy, because then, okay, my implementation uses this resource name, and my implementation implements the per node resourcing schema, let's call it like that, which then indicates, okay, this node has so much of that resource. And I assume DRA has to have some sort of mechanism for that, right? Because it has to report some sort of resource values per each node, right? And then the last piece is owned by the driver, by the implementation, but not by us. We just provide the API structure to it. And we just provide some mechanisms. We need to figure it out. Okay, that's fair. We need to figure out how that resourcing is exactly done to know where to expose that knobs for this, right? So that then your implementation can implement that piece on your own. Do you see that, Lionel? Because I don't think you don't provide this in a spec, right? Today you don't do that, right? You just request a specific amount of it, but in the spec you don't specify how to get that information and provide it to the scheduler, right? That's my point here. So I don't think that's what you're calling out. If we were to obscure that information, I don't think that that will be a problem. And I think right now, you go ahead.
When you write a resource claim, you write this information with these opaque parameters, and you also write the request. You also write a selector in the request for what are the properties of the device you would like to claim. It's not written here, but I could send you an example from Antonio.
Okay.
Because it's the part
So
that
then we can
I haven't.
then we can definitely standardize on somewhere. There needs to be resource claim. Okay, let me share that to everyone so everyone can see that. Share this guy. So what do you mean here? So we have a selector. Is that what you refer to?
Yeah, exactly. And then you have this resource slice that contains these parameters, and then your scheduler will try to find a node where this this expression could be fulfilled.
And so this is just a selector, keep in mind. It has to be somehow still exposed on the node.
Via
Fit
the
that,
resource
right?
slice.
Right, well, whatever it is. So this is just a standardized ways on how we are going to define that filtering, and we can define it in us, and then because this is still just filtering. Keep in mind, this is still just filtering. It doesn't say, on, okay, this node has a VLAN X. This just says, go to your driver specification and find there will be value type dummy, right? Someone has to now provide that data somewhere. That's my point to this. So,
But
and
this
the
should be a
last
driver,
piece,
I think.
yeah, and this is where the implementation comes in, and that information isn't specified in the resource claim. That's what I'm getting at. So we are just providing you a path towards the driver, and the driver then provides that information. And to be honest with you, not exactly, because what you're saying means that every node, because keep in mind, driver is at the last end of the whole thing. So not exactly what you're saying. Driver is just the bottom element that's, or okay, I received the pod already. There needs to be something earlier that will indicate on the pod so that the scheduler can make a decision. So before we go to the driver that executes on the node, there has to be something else. It might be the driver itself as well that would report, I have that much of this resource. It's like what we do with SROV, right? The same story. It has to apply here as well. So what I'm getting at is then the piece that provides and advertises the amount of resources per node is what's custom and what your implementation is going to implement. But then how you get that information is what we standardize on, right? And your driver just needs to report that value. That's it. And we make it more robust, so it's a flexible, and it's up to you how you're going to advertise that, and then you can just specify that in the pod network. Yeah, that's basically it. Or not, or be more rigid and basically saying, okay, more multi-networking, you have to specify your driver name dash multi-network something resource name on each of the nodes, and specify whether you have 1 or 0 or however you have of them, right? That's one thing. And by the way, we can definitely introduce a basic resourcing, which is IP, where I can apply a specific CIDR range to a pod network, right? And then based off the range of the size of the CIDR range, I can say, okay, you have half of the IPs available on your nodes everywhere globally, right? Or per each node. So depending on what IPAM scheme for the network you are taking, right? Whether it's a per node or global, right? And then I can say, okay, you have this many this many available resources, IP resources on each of the nodes or globally, right? And that way, this is something that we can do in our implementation as a reference implementation. This is the basic one resourcing that you can have based on IP. And it doesn't limit you to, of course, this doesn't provide you a node selective availability here. This is where your driver has to step in to kind of add that capability, saying, oh no, you know what, that VLAN is only available on node B and C only, right? And that's something that we need to provide ability to expand on that kind of filtering. I don't think, keep in mind, the resource claim is only a filtering mechanism. It's not a definition mechanism on how the specific number of resources are defined on the driver. This is, I think, it's separate item. Do you see, Lionel, what I'm saying or calling out here?
Yeah, it's a bit more. I have trouble to see with this resource slice component, but I mean, as I said, I haven't looked so much into this part, the scheduler part
I
of the
haven't
SPM.
either. So I think this is the gap we need to be more to provide how that part works too. So I think our main topic for today was to look at how stuff is referenced on the pod to see how that would look like the CUJ. But what you're calling out, let's maybe tackle that next time, okay? So we can, so for the next week, let me just maybe share this stuff. So maybe let me get to the next step is integration with the array, scheduler integration. Read into the array. So we need to see how the array scheduling works and then apply how it would work right here, right? I think that's what we're calling out, Lionel. But I don't think if we were to do the controller stuff, that will be a big problem. I think that's that. Going back, because I want to kind of close on the namespacing though. Any feeling where that should go towards? Any reasoning to have it one or the other ways? Cluster scope. I'm talking about like pod network, right? Because we know the DRA is namespaced, right? And I think we can go both ways as well. We can have pod network that will be namespaced, which will make, yeah, wherever you create it, this is the only place where you can reference it. But then what my concern with that one is you don't have a global network, right? If I have a network X, I have to replicate it everywhere. And I'm referring now to the pod network. I don't care about the DRA. That's just like the implementation detail. Now I'm talking about like the top high level, right? If I want to connect the same network in multiple namespaces, I have to replicate that, right? And or what Doc, what you're saying, or what network attachment did, put it in a default namespace. What if I don't have access to default network namespace, right? Or maybe that's a artificial problem, right? But is that okay?
We in Multis it's configurable, right? So you could kind of set it up how you want.
No,
it,
but it's
like,
set in stone, right? I know what you're saying, but then that means that that's the way we have to use it. It's configurable in a ways where you have the isolation or not. Otherwise, you have to define a global namespace, which then everyone can have access to, right? Because that's what it boils down to, right? That's, I think, the question is that right or not? Yeah, I think that I'm questioning that. Sorry.
Well,
And I'm
I
not saying
guess
it's right.
I guess so here's the thing. I guess there's always been sort of a challenge with net attached def is this idea of like user serviceability, right? So
Mhm.
what can the users service themselves? And it's like net attached def itself is like sort of a privileged action to be able to manage them, right? And then you have to have a way. So okay, you're a cluster administrator, you've created a few net attached defs, and some of those have to be in a special namespace so that you can let other people access those, right? So you don't have to create a million copies of them. And so it does create this sort of tension with like, hey, in order to start doing anything at all, you need to have somebody that has these like kind of super privileges to do it,
Right.
right? So if we have these be so I think in the end of the day, I think it's just trade-offs. Like I don't know, I do see some elegance in having them be, global resources and not namespace, but then if they're namespaced, then potentially there's a like path to let users service them themselves to some extent, or a less privileged class of users, I guess I should say. But yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, I
I see
see it
what you're
both
saying.
ways too.
So because keep in mind that let's and that I think boils down to boils down to how, because you say a SAP, even if I had a let's say what you just mentioned, right? I can give a lower privilege, so you can create your stuff. You can still create it, but you can create it only in your namespace. What really a sort of limitation is that anyway? Why I'm saying is because your network can define things in a ways where I can access anything. You see what I'm saying? What I'm saying. So if, like, say, let's say, let's call it. Let's look at network attachment definition, and let's say I'm using MacVLAN for simplicity, right? Inside the spec, the JSON. What blocks me unless I have a special additional validation? What blocks me to
And
attach
so yeah,
to any
so
what blocks me? So if I have a even if my permissions are limited to just namespace, I still have a full admin privileges
yeah,
to the node.
and so yeah, I tend to agree with you because also net attached def usually set up the way that I always set it up is that only your administrator can create them to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Because the
If you
thing
have power
is,
to create it, you have power to everything. You cannot unless you have extra
so
webhooking, right?
right. I mean, you could set it up differently if you wanted, but it's not the way that I would set it up and wouldn't recommend it for exactly the reason that you're saying, right? Like it's a privileged thing to be able to do. And I mean, I would say that that's a very good argument for making it a global resource. So yeah, because you're gonna need it anyways.
Yeah.
I I can definitely I can get on board with that. I definitely
All right.
was just trying
So
to
uh,
yeah.
uh, and the other aspect to this one, what I would see is the centralized, at least, status of the network, right? Because then, okay, I have network X and Y, and then I can easily see what's the status of that, right? Because it's representing whatever is in my infrastructure, right? If I were to have it namespaced, okay, where is that network really? Which, if it's namespace, is kind of, all right, see you, Doc. So that's kind of where the centralized info about the network and its status is kind of being diluted, right? So I would want to have that as well. All right. So I think any other voices, because me and Doug was talking about, like, we are leaning towards, I hope, having it cluster scope. I know we moved, I think we talked about this back 1 year ago. I'm bringing this up again so that that's, I think this is where we want to move towards. Any other voices against cluster scoped or for all right, I think that says it. So let's maybe I will just write it down here. Cluster scoped. And I need to, maybe there might be some other aspects we are not catching. We're just talking about like CUJs here, but there might be some other aspects of RBAC. I don't know, related stuff that maybe cluster scope is a bad idea, but then we can revisit this. For now, let's assume we have a pod network, which is cluster scope, and with the notion of having a controller that's going to replicate those DRA stuff across all namespaces. And then on top of this, we can have in the future some mechanism to limit which namespaces we can allow to create those objects in, right? Because that can be as well controllable, right? I can say that, yeah, this namespace is this pod network is only available in namespaces X and Y, right? So we can do that as well, right? Or other way around, we can be very limiting initially specific namespace, except maybe for the default. All the pod networks are limited to none, and then you need to specify an allow list rather than a block list, right? So that's something that we can additionally expand on in the future. All right, so there is that aspect. Now, getting back to the reference on the pod, I found this. This is, I think, what I found in maybe So we have a pod. Let me maybe just do something like that so we can better word see this. So we have a pod and it has two ways to reference. This is from the DRA documentation. We have something on the pod level, on the container level, which I assume we don't want to, right? So we should able to say that, yeah, you should not be able to specify this on the pod, the container level. I wonder, Dionel, do you know, is it possible to, or is there a way to control that, to say that, okay, this claim can only be defined on the pod level?
Yeah, this is possible.
No, I know
The-
it's, oh, is there a way to block it one way or the other?
No, it's not possible to block it. I don't think so.
So can I define a template that can only be defined on the pod level, not on the container level, right? Okay, I think
I,
that's
I see what you mean, but I don't think so. I think it could be a good feature because, yeah, if your driver doesn't support container level, it doesn't make sense to have it. So
yeah, exactly. So okay, so that's something that, but here I'm seeing this is just like a resource. This is not, this is something that, this is not the container level resource claiming that I would imagine, right? Because this is just like volumes. They define here a volume and then map it to the container. I think that's what it is. Is there other way? Node selector, no. Because there was an ask for that, right? On a pod level resource claim, right? Or is that this? Is it this?
to me, yes, this is the way. So you refer
Because
to
you see it here, because this one is just, okay, this is the definition, and then the cat 0 is referenced here, right? So basically, this is like a volumes and mounts, right? So we define the volumes here, and then we mount them into a container. I assume for the purpose of our thing is just making sure containerd can pass this to us as well, regardless of container. I think that should be the ask from containerd then.
I could send the cap about this. So there's two caps. Let me find them. So
Let's see.
It's resource pass through CRI. I think Mike Brown is looking at this one. And there's another one that is related to pod level resources, but it's an old one, and I'm not sure if it will cover the array.
This is an issue. This is an issue. Okay, we need to go to the Gavit cell. Okay, it's here. That's the one. That's the one. Yeah. Why the heck it doesn't want to go? Issue pool.
You're in the pull request now.
Oh, it did load it? Oh, okay. Okay, still. Files change. No. User stories. Let's see at user stories. But do we know whether you're gonna pod resource config? That's what you want to add. Container resource config. There it is, you see? So no, it's on a container level. So it's a per container. So no, that doesn't work for us. Unless pod resource, Kubernetes resource. Oh yeah, no, sorry, my mistake. There it is.
Yeah, and that's the second cap I mentioned.
Yeah.
But I don't know
No,
if this will cover DRA or not. It's a bit unclear.
But yeah, this is the pod level stuff. All right, yeah, container config, and then there is the Kubernetes resources. There's a request and limits. No, I don't think that's it, right? Because this is what Kubernetes resource pod sandbox, pod resource config. This will have pod resource config is this. Is that the same as that? I think so, yeah. I can't what this is. Okay, yeah. This is expanding with this. So this would be good if we had this, right? So let's see that guy then. This is an issue. Again.
This is
Limits.
another cap.
What's that?
Another cap about pod level resources, but
Right.
I don't know.
This is some old stuff, right? Or is this still online? This is still ongoing. This is pod level resource limits. Okay, yeah. But those are just limits, and I assume pod container here it is, right? I don't think that's what we need. We need a DRA stuff, but I wonder whether we can pass the DRA limits. So my concern with this one, let's get back to this, to the DRA, share this stuff. My concern is this would work for us if this would be understood the same we think about this, right? And what I mean is we take a resource out of this and pass it to in a pod level. But I assume if this is not defined, the thing that I crossed out, if this is not defined, that means, yeah, there is no op. I do nothing. It's like if I define a volume on a pod, if I don't mount it, I don't worry about it, right? I don't, it's there. It's over specified, but it's not really used. That's my concern here. So I wonder whether that's, unless this has double meaning, it can be both ways, what I'm saying, where it's defined as a mount, or is it as its own thing on a pod level though, then that's good. But otherwise, yeah, it might be a problem. Okay, I think that's something that we need to read in. But besides that, I think containers, resources, and resource claims, any concerns on that level of, because that's going to be, this is what the array is. And basically what I'm thinking is if I have let's say, if I am going to have a pod network, let me just do this. So I have a pod network named data plane, right? What I'm going to do is have a resource claim template that's going to be called data plane, right? And you can name it whatever, we don't care about the name, but you reference the data plane. And in the background, we do have a claim named data plane, right? Because this is where our controller comes in and basically creates that resource claim, let's say here.
Just to mention that also that how to get the resource claim itself from when you configure, because we were talking about like CRI or containerd passing this data. The way to do it now is to just use the Kubernetes API to get this resource claim and get the data that has been
and that will be the first step until, I know that's perfectly fine here. Yeah, that's this is what Multus does today anyway. So there is, yeah, that's the standard way. Yeah. So the containerd, what you're saying, is something that would improve us and remove the dependency of the drivers for multi-networking on Kubernetes API. I think that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal of this, to be independent out of the Kubernetes API. I got a pod, and then I fully have all the informations locally to kind of set up that pod. In the Multus world, today that's impossible because you have to query the Kubernetes API for the network attachment definition, right? And yeah, that's fair. So let's say this is created via controller, multi-network controller, right? So this is a resource that will be named as well, data plane, and with the namespace, whatever is this one, right? Does this one has a namespace? It doesn't. Namespace xxx, let's say, right? Go home. And this one will be in namespace xxx as well. So let me maybe highlight some of the things. So this thing, then this guy is, let's say this is, what is this? Green, sun green. So this data plane matches this data plane, right? Any comments on this? And this is completely, this will be completely just, the DRA aspect is just obscured, and that's just in the background, right? So this is, we don't care about this. The name just has to match in the specific namespace, and I just reference this, but it got created from that, right? So one concern we have is what you said, Lionel, on ensure that even if we automate creation of this, doesn't block us from using the scheduling for DRA, right? So that this one is properly set. And I think the other question mark would be this per pod level kind of claim, right? So I think those are the two unknowns currently. Let's call them out. And then the other aspect was, okay, pod level.
Well, I mean, this you don't need to like have the resource claim in the container level. If you have it only in the pod level, your DRA driver will be called to allocate these resources.
Is that true? Is that what you did in your POC?
Yeah, it's from 1.31, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think I could not do it in 1.30.
So basically, this will call your driver, just that, without the. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it will call node prepare resources in your DRA driver.
Okay. And then with this template, because this is a template, with this create a per pod reclaim as well?
Yeah, I mean, the node prepare resource will be done with the resource claim that will be created after, based on this resource claim template.
Right. Because this is, and I assume this is all automated, right? This is part of the array. Is that true?
Yeah, it is like this. You create the resource claim template, and then when you create your pod, a new resource claim is created for your pod.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be set in the container.
No.
All right.
Just maybe you can check the POC from Antonio, and you can check my POC. We have the same result.
Yeah. All right. So I think that the last piece is no op, right? Unknown. So we have that. Okay. Yeah.
The unknown part maybe you were missing is this passing the resource through CRI.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, pod level resource. Right, that's container D or CRI. Right?
Yes,
Let's
you're right.
CRI. Okay. Yeah. Any comments to this user? This is like a customer's user journey, right? For this, so we create a pod network, which is cluster scope. Based on this, we create with the controller the templates the way they have to be. We need to define that what they're gonna be, so that everyone knows what to expect. And then in your pod spec, in the resource claim, you just call that name, right? I think having the pod network refer here as such is not a big deal. Where would be the per interface data in the claim, right? This is where your spec came in, right, Lionel? We would publish that into the into that aspect, right? All the kind of return data from the per interface stuff, right?
You mean after the interface gets created and configured?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yes, it's in the resource claim status.
Yeah. So I think that's something that we can add here. So now I think there should be a proper slide for that, but just write it down. So status is posted to the pair.
And just a reminder about this is that the implementation is ongoing. There's a PR created for this, and
Yeah.
you're free to review it. And if you disagree with the way it is now, we could always come back later. Probably. I mean, if
I
we
think
see
right
that
now it's
the status.
it's very basic, right? I assume it's let's see, is that the one? I think that's that's the one. So as we
No,
have it, it's this is the cap, yeah.
this is implementation, I think.
Oh, this is the implementation,
Where,
right? Yeah. You're right.
but what I meant is the where the data is stored, like because now it's in the resource claim status, but do we want to push it to the pod status? It's
Oh, that part. I'm I don't know. I'm kind of fed up with that battle. Go pushing anything into core. That's why I'm not pushing for that. That's my take. Uh, I know it will be viable. I agree with you on that part, but you know, it's just. I assume this is another cap of its own to be able to provide that data there, right? Yeah. Any other comments? I know what you're saying, Lionel. Since we are doing this status, maybe let's say that to kind of put a dot on this. Could we? Is that something that we can return to in a year or so? What do you think? Or
I think it's
that's too late. That's too late, and that will just be forgotten and no point.
I think it would be better to keep this feature in alpha for now, and then if we think that in a year we want to modify it and put it in pod level, it's better to keep it in alpha than trying to remove it.
I want to. Why I'm saying this is I want to maybe reduce scope here as well. Maybe because this gives us a straight path. Everything is completely independent. Your cap path is in. You're making implementation for it. So we have place right now. We have a placeholder at least. I agree with alpha. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I agree with you. Keep in mind though, it cannot be alpha all the time. But I think that's yeah. Well, but I think at least till end of Q1, when we're gonna have this design fully fleshed out and reviewed by SIG Networking, and then when we have this whole full plan on all this, and then we can say, so what if we were to push all this status into the pod status, right? Because then we have like everything better fleshed out and defined. And the last piece would be, what about that, right? And definitely in the design, we need to provide that optional status to, apologies, to push to pod status, right? All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's at least is that a okay plan?
Yeah, to me it seems fine. I just wanted to let people be aware that
Yeah.
it's ongoing, and then if they have any concern or anything else.
Oh, I got this note here as well to kind of set this. Okay. Any other comments to this? All right, I think this gives us another kind of piece of the puzzle of how it is done. I think next week let's focus on the scheduler then. How to integrate, how would that look like? Keep in mind this implementation will not provide like a very sophisticated scheduler tweaks, but we want to know about it to kind of define how the implementers can do that, right? So we need to ensure that whatever we build, it won't block them from using it. And we have a proper, we are flexible enough that, yeah, either I'm hoping this will be just us investigating and walking through how this works and saying, yeah, this is completely on the side of the implementation of the driver and the controller for it. And if we define the DRA the way we are thinking here, it won't block anyone from doing that. I think that's the conclusion we get to next week, and we just need to confirm that, right? Read into the scheduler piece of this. All right, I think we are almost at the time. Any other comments?
Yeah, just again about the status. Yesterday I joined the DRA meet, the working group device management, and they were talking about which cap will not which cap will the implementation will go in, because it's 1 week from the code freeze,
Okay.
and there's still a lot of things to review. So I'm not 100% sure it will get in, but the implementation at least is there and still need to be reviewed. So
the cap got reviewed and approved, right?
yes, but the implementation needs to be
right.
reviewed and approved.
So yeah.
Just so people are aware.
Yeah, I don't think we are in a rush here, Lionel, so I'm not concerned about that. If we're gonna come up with this design, I'm counting this design to get ready set in Q1. That's my thinking. I'm not sure. Maybe end of the year to have the draft of this and then float it in Q1, and then do the implementation. I assume, yeah. But I hear you. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't block us with anything, at least at this point. It definitely, yeah. Go ahead, Lydia.
I was just gonna ask. So the plan would be, when you say that by the end of the year we would probably not finalize, but have a design here and then float it in Q1. Would it be the same cap that you have that would be modified, or
No,
are
the
we
cap
talking?
is for Kubernetes enhancement. This is Kubernetes. This is not the Kubernetes enhancement. Caps are for core Kubernetes, which
Okay.
we got rejected. They don't want it. So right now, there's going to be some doc, which we are going eventually transform into a main documentation for the repositories that we have created for multi-network. So no, it will not be a cap. Eventually, we will get some maps, multi-network enhancement proposals in the future, probably. Something like there is a gateway enhancement proposals, and you name them. So eventually, when we're gonna grow to a more robust community and more solid community, then we can have maps in the future. But this will be 001 map, multi-network
Got it.
enhancement
Okay.
proposal. So and since we don't have that big of a thing, so I think this is initial design for this. So I don't think we need to. Yeah.
Okay.
So no, we will not enhance. The cap is dead and that's closed. So this will be just a copy paste of that one probably. Yes, I agree with you. But float it as a just probably doc initially, and then convert it into a README of our repository, or README, or like initial design, architectural design of this.
Okay.
All right, folks. Let's call it. Thanks, everyone. Meet you next week.
Thanks. Bye.